politicians love to repeat it. GDP is rising, the economy is soaring. Then we look at our paychecks and supermarket prices and ask ourselves, but where? Don't worry, it's not your imagination. It's the Great Decoupling. For the first time in history, the wealth of nations and the well-being of citizens have stopped moving together. Corporate profits are hitting historic records, yet our purchasing power is frozen at 2010 levels. The money exists, but it ends up elsewhere. If the cake gets bigger, why is our slice always the same? We often say, it's taxes and politicians' fault. Partly true, but don't look for easy scapegoats. Today, we'll investigate 12 European nations to reveal the 3 precise mechanisms that are devouring our prosperity. And we'll uncover some unexpected countries where, against all odds, wages are rising faster than inflation. Welcome to Amazing Europe. To understand where our money goes, we must dismantle myth number 1, GDP as a measure of real wealth. In a globalized world, money can flow through a country inflating the statistics without improving citizens' lives. Dublin is the perfect laboratory. On paper, it looks like a superpower. With GDP per capita at 220% of the European average, every Irish person should be twice as wealthy as a German. But walking through Dublin, you see a brutal housing crisis and sky-high costs. Where's the trick? Economists call it a dual economy. On one side, multinationals have headquarters in Dublin, paying billions in taxes and high salaries to their direct employees. On the other side, there's the domestic economy where the majority live. The problem is that the billion-euro profits recorded in Dublin inflate GDP, but they do not end up in ordinary people's pockets. Worse, these giants push up the prices of housing and services, making Ireland one of the most expensive countries in Europe. The decoupling is surreal. Looking at actual individual consumption, that is, what families can truly afford, the mask falls away. Ireland plunges from second place to the middle of the ranking, below the European Union average. Here's the first answer. GDP grows, but it's doped by foreign profits. You live in one of the statistically richest countries in Europe, yet your purchasing power is average. The money exists, but prices eat it up. In popular imagination, Sweden is the model of stability, but behind a strong GDP lies a fragility. Wealth built on private debt. Swedish households carry one of the highest gross debt loads in the world, well over 190% of disposable income. For decades, a permissive banking system promoted interest-only mortgages. Borrowers paid only interest without repaying principal. Rules for new loans tightened in 2016, but a mountain of historic debt remains on household balance sheets. The mechanism worked like this. You buy a house for €500,000. With a standard mortgage, you repay part of the principal plus interest each month. Eventually, the house is yours. With interest only, the bank said, pay me only the rent on that money, the interest. Don't repay the €500,000 now. The monthly payment was tiny, but it hid 2 traps. First, rate risk. Because the debt stayed fixed at €500,000, interest was always calculated on the full amount. If rates rose, the monthly payment could suddenly double or triple. Second, perpetual debt. The €500,000 remained there forever. It had to be repaid in a single lump sum when you sold the house or at your death, taken from the estate. Here the real danger kicked in. If the house still fetched €500,000 or more, you could settle the bank. But if the market crashed and the house was worth only €400,000, the sale wouldn't cover the loan. You could end up homeless and still owing €100,000. It was an all-or-nothing bet. You lived in a house that was never truly yours, while retaining liquidity to spend or invest. It worked only as long as rates stayed low and house prices rose. When rates exploded in 2023, the system shuddered. Mortgage payments, almost all variable rate, doubled. Today, in 2026, with rates stabilised around 3%, the emergency has eased. But the lesson still stings. Many Swedish families discovered they were asset-rich in stocks and bricks, yet not so cash-rich at month-end. Here is the second illusion. GDP measures assets, not the financial stress of those who must sell shares to buy groceries. If Ireland is a phantom and Sweden runs on credit, the United Kingdom is the perfect example of masked inequality. Looking at national GDP, the UK remains among the world's leading economies. The City of London churns out record profits. But there's a trick. GDP is an average. An average works like body temperature. If your head is in the oven and your feet are in the freezer, the average temperature looks fine. Yet the patient is dead. In the UK, London is the oven. The capital sucks in investment, talent and wealth, producing a GDP per capita that rivals New York. But once you pass the M25, the motorway ring around the metropolis, you enter another country. In the Midlands or the Northeast, real wages are stuck at levels from 15 years ago. In many areas, disposable income is lower than in Slovenia. British GDP grows because London's property values and financial bonuses push up the arithmetic mean, but that wealth remains locked in a closed circuit. For a teacher in Manchester or a factory worker in Sheffield, reading that the British economy is growing feels like a mockery. Their purchasing power doesn't rise. In fact, it's eroded by the prices generated by a capital that runs too fast. Here's the third illusion of GDP: concentration. A country can become statistically richer while the majority of its citizens become effectively poorer. So, from these three countries, we've understood the first part of the answer to our question. Why, when GDP rises, don't we feel it? Because that money is often not ours. In Ireland, it's merely transiting to a tax haven. In Sweden, it's borrowed from the future. In the United Kingdom, it's stuck in the capital. But there's a second reason, even more insidious. Sometimes the money really does arrive in our country, and it may even show up on our payslip as a raise. Yet before we can spend it, someone slips it out of our pocket, and it's not the state. Welcome to Block 2, the rentier trap. Sometimes, even when a pay raise actually lands on your payslip, it's immediately intercepted by fixed costs, above all housing. In practice, you work in a growing economy, but most of the gains flow to asset owners, and less to those who work. First, an important clarification. The Netherlands is a wealthy country, and the Dutch are generally well off. Their median equivalized net income of €34,568 per year is among the highest in Europe. Its appearance on this list doesn't mean the country is failing, but that it's a perfect case to show that a high salary doesn't automatically make you rich. Here are the facts that explain the short circuit. In 2025, the Dutch housing shortfall reached a record 400,000 missing homes. Why aren't they building? Not for lack of money, but because of a legal block unique in the world: the nitrogen crisis. Over a third of new building projects, about 244,000 homes, are stalled or slowed because construction site nitrogen emissions breach European environmental rules. The result is a perfect trap. On the one hand, the Dutch economy is pulling and attracting workers. The population grew by 1 million in 10 years. On the other, the housing supply is frozen by law. When demand rises and supply is blocked, prices explode. In 2025, finding a rental in the Netherlands is not just expensive, it's become mathematically unlikely. Because of new property taxes and stricter rental rules, many landlords decided renting no longer paid, so they sold. More than 26,000 homes disappeared from the market in 9 months. Fewer homes, just when more were needed. In Amsterdam or Rotterdam today, it's no longer enough to pay a high price. You have to enter genuine bidding wars for a one-bedroom flat. Here's the Dutch paradox. You might earn €500 more per month thanks to GDP growth. But if your rent demands €600 more because 10 people are competing for the same apartment, your real prosperity turns negative. This is the rentier trap. GDP rises, but it all ends up in the bank transfer to your landlord. Portugal is the textbook example of how a country can import GDP and export its citizens. In recent years, Lisbon and Porto have become Europe's capitals for digital nomads and well-off retirees, drawn by a favourable tax regime that offered near zero taxes to those who moved here. From a macroeconomic point of view, a triumph. Foreign capital, luxury consumption, renovations everywhere. Portuguese GDP grew above the European average. But for the ordinary citizen, it was a financial disaster. So much so that in 2024, the government had to curb these incentives after social protests. Median net pay in Portugal is about €1,100 per month. Yet, the average rent for a one-bedroom in Lisbon has topped €1,500. Rent costs more than the whole salary. How is that possible? Simple. The Portuguese housing market no longer responds to the purchasing power of the Portuguese. It responds to that of Californians, Germans, or French who can pay 3 times as much. The result is a state-led gentrification. Waiters, nurses, and teachers are pushed to the city fringes, while historic centres become playgrounds for high-income temporary residents. Here's the other illusion. GDP rises because it measures spending by those who live in the country, but it does not distinguish whether that spending comes from a local paycheck or from foreign rent. Greece is still paying for past debts. Here, the rentier trap takes its cruelest form: erosion. Greece is growing again, and the financial press talks of a new Hellenic miracle. But for families, this miracle has a bitter aftertaste. The figure that nails the reality is the housing cost overburden rate. Greece is by far the worst country in Europe. More than 27% of the population spends over 40% of their income solely on housing. Why? Because while nominal wages are slowly recovering after a decade of cuts, fixed costs, rent and energy, have exploded, driven by tourism and speculation. For a young Greek, earning €900, a decent entry-level salary, still means not being able to leave their parents' home, since a studio in Athens costs €500 plus utilities. GDP growth ends up covering survival costs that rise faster than wages. So we've seen the second reason for the decoupling. In the Netherlands, it was physical scarcity. In Portugal, it is foreign competition. In Greece, it is the weight of fixed costs. In all these cases, GDP rises, but the gains flow into the pockets of property owners, not workers. But there is a third scenario, one where you own a home, you have a good gross salary, and the economy is booming. Yet, when you look at your net pay, you feel like crying. Because between you and your money sits a hidden partner who takes the biggest slice. So far, we've seen money disappear into finance or real estate. But there is a third black hole, perhaps the most frustrating one: taxation. Here, the decoupling happens directly on your payslip. The country produces wealth, you create value, yet the state intercepts the growth before it becomes yours, using it to feed an ever more expensive public machine. First of all, we need to make an important clarification about Belgium as well. This is a wealthy country, and gross salaries are among the highest in the world. But it is precisely that small word, gross, that hides the trap. Belgium holds an unenviable world record, the highest tax wedge in the OECD, exceeding 53% for a single worker. What does that mean in practice? It means the state is your majority shareholder. Take an example. When your company decides to grant you a merit raise worth €100 net, it must spend roughly €210. Of those €210, over €110 go to taxes and social contributions, leaving you with crumbs. This creates paralysis. Companies limit bonuses and career raises because they are too costly, and workers do not feel the benefits of economic growth because real net pay struggles to rise. To be clear, we are not saying that Belgians are poor, quite the opposite. Their median wages are high and the welfare system is strong. But we use this country as a perfect example of fiscal drag. Even if GDP soars, the tax system acts as ballast, preventing that wealth from turning directly into extra purchasing power for citizens. It is the classic case where GDP primarily serves to finance the state apparatus rather than enrich those who work. If Belgium is the champion of taxes on labour, France is the world champion of public spending. The French state spends almost 58% of national GDP every year. No other developed country allocates such a large share of resources to the public sector. In theory, with spending at that level, the French should live in a paradise of services. Instant healthcare, flawless trains, golden schools. Reality is different. Here, the decoupling lies between cost and quality. Despite record taxation, the healthcare system faces chronic crisis, with many medical deserts in rural areas. Public safety is a constant concern, and PISA test results are declining. Where does the money go? Certainly towards servicing a public debt that has surpassed 110% of GDP, and into a complex bureaucracy. Above all, into a colossal welfare and pension system that drains resources from investment. The French citizen lives with a frustrating paradox. GDP grows, taxes never fall. Yet there is a clear perception that services are deteriorating. Economic growth merely plugs the holes of a system that consumes more resources than it produces. In Germany, the problem is not only the state, it is the economic model itself that has broken. For decades, the German social pact was simple: industry exports, workers earn. Today, that pact has snapped. Since 2021, real German wages have lost about 4% of their purchasing power. Why? Because the perfect storm arrived. Energy inflation pushed up production costs. The green transition requires enormous investments. And, as the coup de grace, China stopped buying made in Germany and became a competitor. Companies, to avoid shutting down, passed these costs on to workers, freezing wage rises. German GDP stalls or grows only with difficulty, but what little there is gets absorbed by energy costs and compulsory decarbonisation investments. It does not end up in pay packets. The factory worker at Volkswagen or at BASF finds themselves paying the bill for geopolitics. They work as before, yet they are objectively poorer than 5 years ago. Here is the third truth. The state, or its strategic choices, can become a drag. In Belgium, it taxes growth. In France, it squanders it in bureaucracy. In Germany, it burns it in energy costs. It seems there is no way out. Either rent eats it, or the taxman eats it. Yet there is a corner of Europe where this perverse mechanism runs in reverse, where wages rise faster than prices and GDP turns into real money in people's pockets. And no, it's not where you think. But before we reveal it, if you found this video interesting, we kindly invite you to support our project with a like, subscribe to the channel, and click the bell so you don't miss our new videos. Thanks a lot. By now, looking at the names of the next 3 countries, many of you will think, thanks a lot. We're talking about nations that until yesterday were considered poor, and one still is. It's easy to grow when you start from the bottom. That objection is legitimate, but the data tell a deeper story. We included them, not because they are the best or are doing everything right, far from it. They still face several problems. Yet they're worth analysing because while many mature economies suffocate under rents and bureaucracy, these places are actively trying to turn macroeconomic growth into real money in people's pockets. Poland is not a miracle, it's planning. How did it turn GDP into real wages, which have been rising for 3 consecutive years at a net pace between 5% and 8%, consistently outpacing inflation? Simple. It stopped competing on low cost and bet on complexity. Over the past 5 years, Warsaw has promoted special economic zones and targeted tax breaks, not to open call centres, but to attract battery factories, R&D centres and advanced IT services. These high-value added sectors naturally pay higher wages. In addition, the country has kept a competitive tax wedge, around 34%, well below the Belgian 53%, allowing firms to pass a larger share of that value to employees. Unemployment is also at historic lows. To find qualified staff, companies often bid up wages. Result? Productivity rose and wages followed because the labour market is healthy and taxes do not eat the whole increase. Romania is the most surprising case, but also the most volatile. True, the country has battled among the highest inflation rates in Europe, reaching double digits recently, risking to swallow all purchasing power. Yet wages have raced even faster. How? Thanks to two engines. First, a privately excellent sector, especially IT in Bucharest and Cluj-Napoca, that is fully integrated into the global market and pays near Western salaries in a country with still Eastern costs. Second, an expansive public spending policy and a very large budget deficit that supported state incomes. This mix allowed Romanian real consumption to officially overtake that of Greece and Hungary. Romania reacted to inflation by growing, not by cutting. It's a risky race between prices and wages, also fueled by public debt. But so far wages are winning and living standards in big cities have exploded. Montenegro is the only genuinely poor country on the list, attempting a radical experiment called Europe Now. The government made a bold two-stage move, first eliminating employee health contributions and, more recently, cutting pension contributions. Result? Net paychecks surged, with one-off increases of 20 to 30%. Where's the catch? Who pays for healthcare and future pensions? The state bet everything on higher consumption. By putting more money in people's pockets, it hopes to collect far more VAT on the goods they buy. It's a high-risk strategy. First, inflation shot up immediately afterwards, eroding part of those gains. Merchants knew people had more cash and raised prices. Second, if the math doesn't add up, the future pension system could be compromised. Montenegro is on this list for a precise reason. It's the only country that dared to say today's workers' net pay matters more than the state's balanced accounts. Will it work long term? Too soon to tell. But for now, it's Europe's most aggressive economic experiment, and it will be fascinating to watch how it ends. The lesson today is clear. Stop looking at GDP. It's a figure that serves politicians, not us. Our well-being depends on the residue, what's left in your pocket after rentiers, debt or taxes have taken their share. Now it's your turn. Which of these situations do you recognise? Do you live in a country where housing is through the roof, taxes are high, or wages are rising faster than inflation? Write your country and your story in the comments. Speaking of inflation, we recommend this video where we rank all European Union countries by how much supermarket prices have risen in the last 10 years. That's all for this video. See you next time.